Okay, thanks for having me. I'm Andrea Traynor from Stanford, and we're going to be talking about the baby-friendly initiative and immediate skin-to-skin contact. So I have no financial or pharmaceutical or any other disclosures, but the one disclosure that I do have is that I am a card-carrying granola, and I'm as much of a granola as any obstetric anesthesiologist that you'll ever meet. And I think that this is an appropriate topic considering that Haight-Ashbury is just down the street, and this is a very touchy-feely topic at a scientific meeting. However, I'm hoping that I can convince you that this is actually physiologic, and it's just as physiologic as anything else that we do. It needs to be a priority, and it requires multidisciplinary implementation, and we need to be a part of it. So what is baby-friendly? Well, the Baby-Friendly Hospital Initiative started in 1991 from the World Health Organization and UNICEF. And essentially, it's a breastfeeding initiative. It's an effort to get breastfeeding back in the mainstream and to have it be the most widely used way to feed babies. And this sounds, like a no-brainer to us, but this was actually in a response to a lot of the formula companies going into third world countries and trying to push their formulas. So the World Health Organization started to see a problem and said, wait a minute, we need to get breastfeeding a huge resurgence. And so that's where it came from. So I think it's really important to understand that this is a worldwide initiative. This isn't just us, this isn't just Haight-Ashbury, this isn't just me in California saying we need to do this. This is coming from all over the world. 6,000 hospitals in China are using it, and they found that exclusive breastfeeding in China, when they implemented it, went from 10% in urban areas up to 50%, and in the rural areas, exclusive breastfeeding is now about 70%. 87% of hospitals in Cuba are using it, and about 80% of babies born in Taiwan are born to baby-friendly hospitals. Sweden's considered the global leader, and every single hospital in Sweden is baby-friendly. But only about 416 hospitals in the US are actually certified as baby-friendly, and only about 20% of US babies are born at baby-friendly hospitals. So I'm going to get a show of hands. How many of you work at a hospital that is baby-friendly? Okay, good. How many of you have been asked to help with that initiative? Okay. And how many don't know whether they're baby-friendly or not? Okay. All right. So I was asked, I've been asked in different practice environments to help with this initiative, and I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about when I was working in a community hospital, and the nurses came up to me and said, we want to be baby-friendly, and they really wanted to be able to put that on the marquee and say that this was something that they were doing, and so I had to learn. I had to be educated. So the requirements are pretty extensive, and they all involve breastfeeding and education about breastfeeding. And here's the one we can help with. A lot of them we can't really help with. We have no control whether or not the newborn gets food or drink other than breast milk. But we can control this. Babies placed in skin-to-skin contact with their mothers immediately following birth for at least an hour. For the cesarean deliveries, that requires us to help. And so that's why I'm here, is to talk about how we do this and why we do this. And I think that one of the most important things to realize about this, and when I started looking for the science, because I was sitting in a room of nurses that were saying, you guys are preventing us from accomplishing this. You anesthesiologists, you're preventing this. And I thought, well, I'm not the enemy. I love pregnant women. This is what I want to do. And they were citing literature that I quite frankly didn't know, and I had to go look it up. And they were right. And I think that the most important thing that I can get across to you is that it isn't just about breastfeeding, that this is about the physiology of the newborn experience. And it starts and ends with our favorite molecule, or my favorite molecule perhaps, oxytocin. And it looks like this is the chemical structure, and this is what it looks like. And we all, we learned in school, right, that this is what oxytocin does. Oxytocin works at the uterus, and we love oxytocin, right, because we give these infusions of oxytocin and it makes the uterus contract, and then, then we don't have uterinectomy and we don't get massive hemorrhage. So I like oxytocin for that. And then oxytocin also works at the mammary glands to initiate breastfeeding. But what I didn't know, and what I hope that you guys will take away, is that oxytocin does so much more. That it actually does a very, very vast amount of things in the brain, that it has widespread effects in the brain. And so I'm hoping that I can convince you of its physiologic effects being much more widespread than just what we think of. So oxytocin works in the brain. This is a schematic here of the brain from this fabulous article in the psychology literature that I highly recommend, and I've got the reference at the end as well. So, okay, the skeptic says, what are you talking about? How do I even know that oxytocin gets released from skin-to-skin contact? We know that oxytocin is released from breastfeeding. Silly girl, what are you talking about? Well, actually, oxytocin gets released from all of these different organs at the bottom. Now, mammary gland is one of them, and that's what we typically think about. Urogenital tract is one of them, and that's what we think about where it comes from the uterus. But the skin is also one of them. And the skin is on the list, and it also goes to the nucleus tract. It stimulates the nucleus tractus solitarius to release oxytocin. And then that does go to the pituitary to do all the things that we think about, but it also goes to these other regulatory areas in the CNS. So oxytocin is released from the skin it doesn't get released from the skin. The signal goes to the brain for release, but oxytocin release happens with touch, light pressure, massage-like stroking, and warm temperatures. And in rats, there was a study showing that when rats are exposed to petting for 10 minutes, that their oxytocin levels go up. So the rats like it. So it comes from the signal comes from the skin, goes into the midbrain, and then the oxytocin gets released and goes all over the brain. So I'm going to start telling you some of the effects that oxytocin has in the brain. So it goes to the frontal cortex. Well, the frontal cortex is where we regulate cognition. And oxytocin helps affect cortical modulation of cognition. Goes to the nucleus accumbens, and that's the pleasure center in the brain. That's where we process rewarding stimuli. And not surprisingly, this part of the brain plays a role in addiction. Works in the hippocampus, which is part of the limbic system, and that's where emotion and memory are processed. And it's also where our autonomic nervous system is regulated. Works in the periaqueductal gray, which is our analgesia center. And oxytocin has analgesic effects. It may also play a role in maternal love and bonding. Works in